So, the discussion for this week, as you know probably better than me, is again about Quran, and we are going to discuss two different things. One is the Quran itself, its revelation, and more importantly, the collection of Quran, how this book put together and become like a book between two covers. Though you know that we all already discussed this, but we are going to a little bit more specification. Especially, I would like to share with you what Muslims themselves think about the collection of this book. You know, but because it's important to see what the traditional Muslim or Quran itself talks about the collection of book as a as as Quran as something like a book or whatever written or not, but the idea of the book. But so on the other hand, there is another problem that we are going to discuss, which is, as you know, about the Surah Al-Ikhlas, or chapter 112 of Quran, as you all know and probably wrote about it. And we are going to see how commentators discuss the problem of that small chapter. And I want to probably try to, if time permitting us, I'm going to discuss a little bit as a kind of conclusion to that verse, to that chapter, and kind of giving you a sort of philosophical and mystical understanding of this verse, and sort of a theological, but at the same time philosophical one. And also, I'm trying to use some other multimedia resources when we discuss, so those things could help us in order to understand what is happening in the current academia and the world around us regarding the discussion that we have now. So, as an introduction, again, let us look at this PowerPoint that we have here. As you see, this PowerPoint shows us that the period that the time period that Muhammad received revelation, according to Muslim, from God via Gabriel, or via sometimes probably kind of dreams as well, and through different ways, but generally speaking, it's through an angel, which is called the revelation angel, or angel of Wahy. The word Wahy in Arabic means revelation, anyway, or inspiration sometimes. So it was 22 years, 2 months, 22 days, according to historians, that Muhammad received that revelation. But so 12 years, 5 months, and 13 days of all those time, he was in the city of Mecca, where he born, where his tribe was living, and where he, faced opposition, very strong opposition. Never forget about this. I'm sorry, never. This is a very important point, because where he was and where he lived, first of all, the tribe, most of the people, they used to worship idols, so they were idol worshippers and polytheists. They had many different numbers of idols, and they appointed any of the idols for a specific for a specific reason. One was like for curing for illnesses, the other one was giving, probably the goddess of, medicine, the goddess of whatever, the goddess of money, the goddess of wealth. So they have different goddess, and Muhammad comes to a direct opposition with them, which is, telling them that, well, all the god or goddess that you are worshiping are not real, and I'm going to give you and introduce you the real God. So he faced the strong opposition in that city. Look at, so this, you should never forget about this. And then you will see how he talks with them as well. On the other hand, so this 12 years and 5 months, as we mentioned, there are revelations coming during to Muhammad. So the important point is that the theme, the way that those revelations are written now, or we have them, they have a kind of harmony, mostly talking about God itself, mostly talking about the hereafter, good deed, faith, this kind of very interpersonal, personal relation with God. And then also, as well as, telling to those polytheists that if you continue to worship those goddess, I mean, they are not going to help you. So arguing with them, okay. And then at the end, you have that 9 years, 9 months, or not 9 days, which mostly they say 10 years. That 10 years also is when Muhammad migrated to the city of Medina. And then the importance of migration is here. A group of Medians, mostly Christians or some others who were converted to Islam, and then Jews, they are like different tribes, but they came together, went to Mecca hiddenly. In fact, a group of representative of those Medinan people went to Mecca, met Muhammad in secret, and told him that if you come to our city, then we will put you as our leader of community. See, so the individuality of Mecca becomes into the community social aspect in Medina. There is a change and a shift. So now, so Muhammad, after a revelation, accepts and migrates to Medina. It's after 12 years and 5 months and 13 days of his, announcement of or prophethood. Here, this migration becomes a kind of vital point and very important point for Muslims to call it, to set their calendar based on this migration. This is important because Muhammad comes out of the city in which he was facing a very strong opposition, and he was almost threatened to death, and there were attempts to killing him, but he was under protection of his uncle and grandfather from time to time. I mean, the first grandfather and then uncle. And then now he goes to Medina, a city which people welcoming him, and they actually asking him to be, the leader of their community. So what happens when this migrations, when Muhammad goes from Mecca to Medina? So yeah, Quran, the revelation of Muslims, when it talks to Muhammad in the time of Mecca, talks about, how to deal with polytheism, how to argue with those, or, talks about other groups and religions and whatever in this sense. But when it goes to Medina, then verses are becoming kind of, so there is a problem and it's related to community, for instance. It's created to, a family problem, community problem, a kind of things that here and now, it's not going to I mean, it discusses, but mostly uh, changes, and there is a shift to kind of problems that the community has. And so most of the verses in Mecca was facing the monotheism, talking about monotheism, talking about hereafter, salvation face. Now here in Medina, you have other problems as well to deal with, because you are in a community and then questions coming. So that's 9 years, and because of this revelation having been revealed in two different cities with two different backgrounds and with two different communities, two different kind of people, then the language changes, and verses of Quran are, in fact, divided into Meccan and Medina. And then if you open Quran, sometimes when the chapter starts, it's about the title of chapter. Somewhere it's written whether this is a Meccan or Medina. Sometimes most of the chapter is Medinan, but there's some other Meccan related verses are included there. Now, the question, we enter to another issue here. And before entering into that discussion, let me talk about the book itself, because Islamic faith is, if someone converts to Islam or becomes a Muslim, one of the things that among the other he has to believe in is the book itself, the Quran, as it reveals as a revelation of God, a divine revelation. So that's important. It makes it important as a pillar of faith. And on the other hand, so I mentioned that the Quran revealed by God, and then there's an idea and a problem. As I said, there were some verses revealed in Mecca, some in Medina, and some chapters including both. Now, you may ask, okay, who put those verses in, like, finally chapters together in a way that you can say that this is a full chapter from A to Z, and then you say that it reveals some in Mecca and some in Medina, and so why not this book based on what it revealed? The very first chapter or very first revelation, we know that was the chapter recitation, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق, recite in the name of the God who created. So, but if you open Quran as you have it today, it starts with the Surah Al-Fatiha, or the opening chapter. Now we go into the traditional Islamic viewpoint, or we at least go to the Quran as it is, as it defines itself within itself. So Islamic traditional belief about the Quran and collection of Quran is that, according to another verse, chapter 75, verse 17, here's God, Allah says, it is for us to collect and recite it. One. Second, you see, we have without doubt send down the message, and we will shortly guard it. So an idea of protection and an idea of reciting, an idea of protecting it. The point is that traditionally Muslims believe that if there is a book here as Quran, as a physical book between two covers, there is a reality of this book in the heaven, by God. So which is probably not a physical thing, but it's a, as it's called, reality. It's a reality of Quran. And it is also mentioned in Islamic tradition in Arabic as al-lawh al-mahfuz, the protected table. So that protected table has a reality. And then the idea is that the Quran that you have today here, which is not based on chronological, historical timeline, the time that Muhammad received the revelation. Now this one is in fact kind of a mirror of the book which is in the heaven. So the start and beginning and the end is because of the real version of it, or the the version, an archetype that is in divine. Now, this book as well, Quran calls itself in very different ways, and that's why in the Islamic tradition, mostly believe that if you have this Quran, then you connect with this book, and then you probably, most probably, they do practice it. It's in a way that connects you to the divine, to the metaphysical world. And then therefore it was called in several names, like the light and the judgment, the guidance, the wisdom, book of wisdom, and different kind of names like that. Okay. Now, let me see. But there is a problem with what? With modern scholarship, mostly Western modern scholarship about Quran. And those discussions are come, as we read in the book by Michael Cook, about entitled "The Quran, very short introduction." Michael Cook talks about the collection of Quran, and he brings some problems, some questions, which was, telling us that, or raising questions whether book Quran was collected during the time of Muhammad, one. Second, did it collected during the time of the caliphs, those leaders after Muhammad, whether it was kind of collected much later, because there was an idea by two professors, one of them, I guess, Patricia Crone, and also Michael Cook, I guess. Some of them were trying to say that it was a product of much later period. And then, more interestingly, and amazingly, there was an idea that, well, historical Muhammad never was in Mecca. Probably, yeah, I don't recall the name of the author, but later on I can bring you the name. But it was trying to say that the Quran was revealed, or Muhammad was not in Mecca. It was in somewhere like in Petra. Petra is located in Jordan today. So now you have very controversial things. You have, if you say that Quran was revealed in the time of Prophet, then you will say that, okay, show me that the Quran. Is there anything remaining of that Quran? Is there something like a proof of that? And then you do have another idea that it was revealed, it was collected in the time of the caliphs, especially the third caliph, which was called Uthman, and so there is a standard uh, Uthmanic codex. A book was by him, a book that was finally, accepted to say that, okay, this is the Quran, which was revealed to Muhammad with no letter or word omitted or extra to this. Now, the point is that historically we know that those companions of Muhammad, they had their own Qurans as well. They were kind of, scribers of Quran, and it is said in the history that Ali ibn Abi Talib, the son-in-law of Muhammad, had his own version. I mean, his own copy. Ibn Mas'ud, the other one had Ibn Abbas. So these are the companions of Muhammad. And then you also have this Uthmanic Codex. So it may cause a problem because usually those who work with the manuscripts, imagine if you want to work with, I worked with manuscripts of, kind of 1,000 years ago or like 800 years ago. You have an original manuscript probably, and you will see that, okay, it was at the end of the manuscript, it's written that this manuscript is written by me, the author. Or sometimes it says that written by, copied by, by. So by those different peoples. And the idea was that traditionally, when we didn't have the printing machines, what people they did to have a book, like, to have a 200 copy of a book, what was how they were doing this? So the idea is that, okay, the first authors writes the book, and then maybe 1 or 2 copies of himself, and then he gives to professional copiers. What they do, someone stays there in a room and reads it, and there are 5, 10, 15 people that they are just writing. They're just listening and writing it. What happens? Sometimes if you have a good writer and copier, he writes everything perfectly. But if you don't have someone, you have someone, he can write very fast, but he has some mistakes in his writing. He may, omit a word. He may don't listen or don't hear a correct word or write something similar to that. This kind of thing happens in the manuscripts. But what about Quran? So Muslims they try to say that, well, first of all, you see that God says that he protects and preserves, and even not only protection, but, the collection of it. It's God that protects it. On the other hand, they said that it was carefully, protected because it was a pillar of faith and it was important for Muslim. And then not only the way of writing, but there was, Muslims were memorizing it. And memorizing Quran was a culture among the Muslims of, the very early Islam up to the present time. There are people in some countries, an amazing number of people are trying to memorize Quran, and they do memorize it word by word, and they can read it to you. Maybe sometimes I can show you some videos of those people who are like kids, like they memorized, and then they can read the book from first to end and from end to first in a reverse way. Anyway. So these are maybe one of the reasons, some of the reasons that Muslims try to say that Quran is protected, and this is the original one. But nevertheless, Michael Cook shows us that in probably third century, uh, a Muslim author, Al Hassan al Basri, a Muslim scholar, theologian, and mystic from Basra, a city in Iraq, nowadays Iraq. He mentioned and quoted a verse of Quran in one of his writings that you do not have it in the Uthmanic Codex and in the, other Ibn Mas'ud's Codex. So the problem is that, so where it comes from, was there any other codex that we do not have it today? And or what happened? So that's a kind of mystery. Did he made a mistake in writing those verses? Who knows? We don't know. But this is like, this becomes as a question to say that, well, where this guy brought this verse from? So this is a question. So we will go on, continue to this question later. And more problems was brought in by, Western scholars. And we know that historically, so when the Codex, Ottomanic Codex was put together, they sent it to different cities of the times, Muslim province and special city, and they sent probably a copy of it to different capitals, like in Basra, as I said, Hassan al-Basri was from the city, al-Kufa, again, was from Iraq, Medina in Arabia, Yemen, Bahrain, there were the cities or places that Muslims were living at the time. So the point is that, the idea is that what happened to those different or copies that was not called as Ottomanic Codex? Point is that sometimes a group of Muslim scholars later on were trying to say that it's a ruler's duty to, to gather all those remaining copies and, try to destroy them and things like that. But nevertheless, another question is that whether those differences were a big kind of important and significant differences that can make and change the meaning of, or change the goal of the prophecy of Muhammad. Nothing like this is narrated. And that's, as Michael Cook as well, he writes that generally those differences are differences in some words, a way of writing the word, and minor differences. Now, we also should know that in the Islamic sciences, and especially the science of Quran, it is well known that there were some verses in the Quran that within the time and during the lifetime of Muhammad, they were deleted by the order of God. So God sent something based on the place and time, and then later on replaced that order with another order. This kind of things also exist in the history and sciences of Quran. Now, Michael Cook writes in his book and asks that what all this raises is a question of method. Should we simply accept the historicity of one element in our source materials, say the standard account of the Uthman's establishment of the canonical text, and interpret or reject the other elements accordingly? So the point is that what should we do? I mean, we say that, okay, the Uthmanic Codex is fine, and then put aside the other one. During the time that Michael Cook wrote this book in 2000, there was still this question existing, okay? And then I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to share a video with you where the same question is discussed. Hopefully I can open this. So I'm going to share a two short videos. Those showing us, let's say, those short videos are showing us the development of this idea, and whether Quran, was whether Quran was sort of with its different versions, whether Quran is reliable, and then those questions really exist or not, and then what happens next? What happened during this 20 year after this book is written? So let me share this with you. Okay. We very briefly go to see this, and then there's a second one.
Muslims believe the Quran to be the word of God as dictated to the Prophet Muhammad, while most Christians and Jews understand their holy texts to be authored by men inspired by God. This distinction means that critical analysis of the sacred texts, which has so enlightened Christian and Jewish thinking since the 16th century, becomes an extremely sensitive issue when it's applied to the Quran. And it doesn't help when those scholars who are making the attempt are largely Western non-Muslims. Can their studies really shed new light on the text and its origins?
Oh, this is probably, let me check. So one of the, during the time of during the time that this book was written, the Quran, a very short introduction, there was still the idea that what should we do with the variation? I mean, there was an idea that probably Quran was not putting together and collected during the time of Muhammad. Now, later on, now what happened is that there was a discovery. There was a discovery that happened in two different ways that changed the problem. Oh, sorry, we have to pass this. Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, sweetheart.
Sorry for.
Don't worry about it, sweetheart.
And Viz is everything Braces isn't. More
Sorry for the announce. Okay. So let's. What's happening? Okay.
Most likely made from sheep or goat skin.
Let's.
The oldest fragments of the Quran ever discovered.
Sorry. Okay.
You're looking at one of the oldest fragments of the Quran ever discovered. It's written on parchment, most likely made from sheep or goat skin, and it's been dated by experts as being more than 1,300 years old. And that makes it among the earliest known fragments of the Quran anywhere in the world. And it's here in the University of Birmingham. This remarkable document had been resting on the shelves of the university library for decades without anybody realizing just how old it was, until a researcher decided to take a closer look. The pages were radiocarbon dated to no later than the year 645, which means the university has found one of the very earliest known examples.
Finding out that we had one of the oldest fragments of the Quran in the whole world was fantastically exciting individually and for the university as well. I mean, we were expecting it to be early, but we did not, I think in our wildest dreams, expect that it would roughly correlate to the lifespan of the Prophet Muhammad, which makes it an incredibly early Quranic fragment.
The manuscript had been stored here in a collection of Middle Eastern documents brought to Birmingham in the 1920s. Academics here say that this discovery goes back to the earliest years of Islam.
The person who actually wrote it may well have known the Prophet Muhammad. He would have seen him probably. He would maybe have heard him preach. He may have known him personally. And that really is quite a thought to conjure with.
Birmingham is one of the country's biggest Muslim communities, and they have welcomed having such a treasure in their city.
When I saw these pages, I was very much moved, and they were...
Okay. So the idea is that there were discoveries, and after, I mean, those discoveries about the new, very old Quran, which is still under studying with by those scholars of Quran. Now the idea is that, so you have at least, we at the present time, we have a copy of Quran which dates back to the time of Muhammad, and it was written, and you know, you heard about this, and then you can find information about that whether on video channels like YouTube or other papers are written about that, academic papers written about that. And one of the projects that is about this, this very question of Quran, that whether Quran was a book collected during the time of Muhammad or later on, or what happened for the variations and things like that. There's a huge project going on in Germany, and the project is called Corpus Quranicum. And let me share with you the project a little bit, talk about that, because it relates to the current Quranic studies, and it may help us to understand what is happening nowadays with the study of Quran in the Western academia, opposing to those
tears of joy and emotions,
opposing to those previous questions and concerns. So here in Germany, they do have a giant kind of project in order to understand and to find out about the very early versions of this book, which is, kind of important for those who study religion studies. So Corpus Quranicum, if you see it in my in a shared video in my kind of Zoom. So it's in German language, but it's also, there is a version of English for it, Corpus Quranicum. Yeah, so what it says, first of all, they collect the oldest textual witness of the Quran, and then they also try to find out about the variant readings of the Quran, which is called Qira'at. And they do all other kind of the things, the text from the word of the Quran, and commentaries of the Quran, and print editions. They study all those things. And this is not a small project, it's a very big project. It's like for some years as going on now. And for those who want to know more about the question that we discussed a little bit about, they can follow up here and look at this website and find about that. So if there's something else, I try to look at this very quick on the other website, which is also, yeah, Corpus Coranicum is the same. Yeah, that's the same page, showing us the oldest versions of Quranic manuscripts. So they found out that based on their investigation, there was a copy they found like about very early time, like probably not more than 40 years after Muhammad. So there are things that is still ongoing and gives more about a little bit more certainty about the books that was early, There's also another point historically discussed about the revelation to Muhammad by God. So we say that Quran is protected. Quran, God is the protector, and it says that I'm protected. But there happens something else. I mean, which is called the Quran, the Satanic verses. And then there's a history in, Islamic historical, probably the history of Islam, and then which was, I don't know, I mean, which was probably mentioned in some of these resources, except in Quran, in fact. And the idea is that Muhammad was very upset that his own tribe, most of, those people who was living within Mecca are not, converting or not, or opposing him. And he was thinking that, so this is the story this is the narration which says that, so he was sad. And then during the time that there was a revelation to him, and then when Gabriel was revealing those verses to him, Satan interrupted and imported some of the ideas to Muhammad, and then he was repeating those words without knowing that these are from Gabriel. So those words was kind of prizing the idols of the polytheists and saying that God was saying that, yes, they are also good ones and their intermediation is accepted and things like that. Now, so this is discussed kind of hugely in Western academics, among the Western academics as well, those who study Quran. And there was a novel written based on this idea by Salman Rushdie, an originally Indian author who was at IU like 2 years ago. And which was opposed heavily by almost most of the Muslims. They were saying that the idea is not an original idea. It contradicts the very notion that Quran was protected by God, or if those words of Satan was there, then then they are not in the Quran that we have today. It was said in another book by some other people. So we're not sure if that was happened. And then also, probably they were talking about God himself. What this book suggests us, the Quran, it says that, it says that, I mean, if we accept what happened by Satan, and Muhammad was infected by him by intervention of Satan during the time of revelation, then the point is that, yes, if you say that God is protector of Quran, then yeah, it's correct, because God interrupts and makes Muhammad aware of what is happening to him, and then tries to stop Satan. So this is another version of a story, or another reading of it, if you want to accept. It says that if it happened, then God interrupted as well. And then don't forget that in Islamic theology, prophet is infallible, is immune from error. If he was not, I mean, basically in some part in theology, if he is not immune from error, then he is not immutable. You cannot follow him because you are not sure. This is Islamic theology, because you're not sure whether he says right or wrong, and you don't know whether this is a real, true revelation or not. So those kind of discussion comes after the story of the satanic revelations, which was, as I mentioned, have been discussed heavily. But finally, Quran was a canonical and is a canonical text among Muslims, and as we mentioned from the early of this class, it was kind of sacred text for Muslim. Now, let me see. Yeah, I have about half an hour. I enter into the second part of our discussion, which is a discussion about the chapter 112. Again, we go 112 because 112 is important in different ways. 112 is emphasizing the very pillar of faith, of Islamic faith, which is, believe in one God and oneness of God as well, in in opposition to, at least, let's say, polytheists of Mecca. At least, I mean, Muhammad was living among the people who were, polytheists and idol worshippers, and his revolution against them was kind of denying their God. I mean, and that's the very memory that Muslims have about the city of Mecca, and how their prophet was, confronted those people. Confronted not in a way, I mean, the physical, but in argumentative way, to, trying to say that your gods are not real God, but the real God has another, definition. Now let me go back to Razi. Razi is one of the Quranic commentators. He's famous in different ways, probably more than theology. He had kind of a sense of philosophy as well, and, or, what they call in Islamic sense, al-kalam, the science of theology again, but, but he seems to be also a kind of philosopher, kind of commentator. And then the idea is that Razi is not the only commentator of Quran. There are many of those, but he was famous. He was, later on quoted by others, and he had impact to the others as well. I mean, he was, in a way, that, at some point between very early and later on, a bridge, kind of a bridge. Now, the very first discussion that Razi talks about this verse is that, okay, let's talk about why it happened that revealed why this verse revealed. And very kind of he discusses this in few pages. He once says that he narrates the ideas that why the revelation at very first point happened. So now he brings us three different reasons. And then why do we have three different reasons? Because all these things happen to be said by people. You know, you may say that, oh, why are you had all classes online 20 years from now? Someone says, oh yes, because their technology was too, developed and they decided to go online. Someone says that, no, I heard that there was an illness called COVID-19 and that was the reason people. And someone else says, probably, they were out of money, people were not, or whatever, reasons, different reasons. But some of them may occur to be correct ones. I mean, some says, yeah, there was a COVID-19, and also technology was developed and people were able to talk to each other and see each other when they were sitting in their home. Now, you do have these different versions. Razi gives you three different versions, and maybe all of them, maybe some of them are correct. Maybe at the real time, when it revealed, Meccan polytheists came to Muhammad and told him that, well, you're talking about a God, and who is your God, for instance? And or what? And they ask him different questions, and then you have the verse, you have the chapter revealed to Muhammad to let them know who his God is. Another version tells that Jews, we know that Jews were living around Mecca as well, Medina as well, but Jews of Mecca, they asked him, and then also the other one is the Christians of Yemen. They called, and historically in Islamic text, it's called Najran. So it's a point in Yemen, nowadays Yemen, which is under there's a ongoing war, where there sadly a group of Christians of Yemen were asking him, Muhammad, tell us about your God. What is he made of? Gold or silver? Why Christians should ask Muhammad what your God is made of, gold or silver? Why? What I understand is that because goddess of the polytheists in Mecca were made out of different things, from simple stone to wood, to silver, and sometimes from gold, probably. Now, if Muhammad is in Mecca, and then Christians are coming from Yemen, asking him, okay, you're from this city, and they know this city, all people, most of the people are least famous for either worshipping, and they have their own gods, like made of different things. You tell us what your God is made of. That's why they ask this question, and this question seems to me kind of reasonable question. Our Jewish questioners could be, if this God has created creation, who created God? That's another question, which, the answer of this question also is in chapter 112. Whether each of those discusses, the guy, Razi, discusses this question and tell us that, well, people were coming and asking Muhammad about it, and this is the way. I mean, this is one of the way that Quran talks. You have revelation, and the occasions. You have occasions that there is a revelation coming. It's out of questions. I mean, I'm sorry, out of question. It's the kind of consequences or results of questions that people are asking Muhammad, and God tries to answer them. And then you have revelation. Now, all these things, all these narrations in Islamic sense, or in Islamic senses of Quran, is called Asbab al-Nuzul. This is the Arabic term. Asbab, reasons, al-Nuzul of revelation. Reasons of revelation, and why it's revealed. So, okay, so this is one of the terms which is used in, Islamic tradition, asbab al-nuzul in Arabic terms, and it's also used in the English academic or whatever writing about Islam. Sometimes for those who are in the field, they know what does it mean. Anyway, Razi also goes on to say that this verse, however small, however only have 4 sentences or 4 verses, has also been given different names. And those different names not only discuss, okay, a book has different names, but for him, those names are like attributes or telling us the quality of this verse, so it's important, makes it important. Whatever more, whatever more names are there or attributes are there, it's more important the verse is, because it talks about, unity of God. This is called tafrid, fard, individuality, in a sense that there's nothing associated with it. Second name he brings up, tajreed, also the surah of divestment. I mean, there are better and more accurate translation for this. And then tawheed, oneness of God, and ikhlas, the sincerity, devotion, and whatever. And there are much more. These are not the only names that Razi narrates us about 15 different names, and he discusses why those names are, given to this verse, to this chapter. And here you are. Say, He, God, is one. So I mentioned them with red. I colored He. First of all, say, you say Prophet, you say Muhammad in answering the problem, my question. And then there is also discussion that the say was not, sometimes some people say that, well, it is not part of the chapter, or they say that, no, it is part of the chapter because Muhammad is just saying whatever revealed to him, and he cannot omit the say. Qul. He, God, is one. Okay, we go on. And here you have the very first page of Arabic tafsir or commentary by Razi as well, I guess. Okay. There's also another discussion. When they discuss the verse in Quran, it's important, its name, and then what's the consequence of reciting this in Islam or by God? What the award is? So there are hadiths. Hadith means that tradition of Muhammad, saying of Muhammad, the sense that Gabriel told me that, such and such people who repeat this verse, repeat this chapter, they are given such and such and such, award by God. And basically it was known as 1/3 of the Quran. I mean, there are three chapters, three small chapters, the very last page of Quran, each of them given and said that if you read these three small chapters, it's equal to reading the whole Quran, and so you get rewarded by God accordingly. So now, after all this introductory discussions, Razi goes on and discusses the Quranic problem, the problem with or questions with the interpretation itself. Two questions he puts over there. We discussed a little bit last week, the linguistic nature of this verse. Then, we discussed it a little bit, like Ahad and Wahid. And let me tell you what he says. One of the questions he talks about, and I think that it's important in a way to give us a better sense of what the nature of God is in Islam or among the Muslim theologians or philosophers or mystics. The point is that he says that in the first sentence, when he says, here it is, say he, God, is one, okay. The one over there, which is in Arabic, al-ahad, I'm sorry, not al-ahad, ahad, the one is indefinite, on noun, okay, on noun, don't forget this word, on noun, okay. Now, in the second verse, it says that God is the absolute, eternal, self-sufficient, so it is definite. Why something which is undefinite in the first sentence? It's because, but he asks now because he says that one of the question is why indefinite, and then again definite version. Two different verses, two different words, and discussing about God. This is one of the questions that I found it interesting in Razi's commentary when he discusses this chapter, very small chapter. Now, to discuss this, we have only 10 minutes. To discuss this, let me go back to discussion of God. So, say he, God is one. God is the absolute, eternal, self-sufficient. Now, let me see if I have provided some something here, the chapter discussion. Okay, so the point is that, let me go back to this verse. Okay, the point is that, in fact, this chapter is explaining the nature of God in Islam. And not only in Islam, we can talk about religions, all Abrahamic religion. We know that, we should know, whether philosophically or religiously, we know that the essence of God, which is beyond time, space, and any qualification, the essence of God is not knowable, is unknown. You cannot reach to understand it because logically you are not about that. It's beyond you, not you are beyond that. So you cannot, as a human being, or whatever in universe you are, logically they say that you cannot know that essence, one. Second, you know God through his names and attributes. Okay, so there's another way. A God which is absolutely unknown, not knowable, And then you have the God which is knowable, and then you know it through his names and attributes, as we discussed the very first sentence of Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the most benefit, the most merciful. I mean, that beneficent, mercifulness, whateverness of God, you know. You say that you know those things, but you don't know that he and that essence which has and possess all these attributes. Now, so according to this tradition, according to the Islamic tradition, you know God through his names and attributes, by what he does, by what he does. I mean, okay, you see, you know that he created. Okay, you say that he's a creator. Now, but you don't know his essence mentioned. Now there's a question in the third chapter of this very short, in the third verse of this very short chapter, there's a question of neediness or not neediness. We know that Razi also discusses about whether it's a talking about he did not, sorry. Oh, wait, we don't have the question. So, Allah, sorry, in the second verse, second chapter, second verse, you have Allah Samad. So the absoluteness, but it's also translated as the one who doesn't need anything from anyone. So it's absolutely needless, the needlessness. And then there is also discussion that he is not hollow, means that impenetrable. You know, nothing can penetrate in God. What does it mean? Penetrable and impenetrable and not in hollow, and then needy, not needy. Okay. So the point is that if there is an idea of an absolute God, and then if you can imagine any need for him, then for even a little bit, a tiny need, he is not the absolute. He is not the absolute in a theological and philosophical sense, and he is a needy. And that's why in philosophical terms, they discuss God as the necessary being. Necessary being is a being that doesn't need anyone, but anyone else or anything else needs him. And also they call other beings, the created being, as contingent being. They can be, they cannot be. No, their being is dependent on another being, which is the absolute being. So that absolute power, that absolute absolute knowledge must be independent, not depending of anything, and needless. Not hollow. If hollow needs another piece or part, then he is needy, not absolute. Then when he is needy, he is penetrable. A needy thing is penetrable. It's penetrable because needy. And then something comes and adds to him. And then he's not absolute, he's not real, he's not God. Now, with all discussions of God that happen in Islamic terms, there's an idea and question that whether there's one being, an absolute one being in the whole universe, and it is not different beings. One being is God, you know, it's about there, and then the other part of being the universe is somewhere else. The unity of being. So this is a huge discussion in mysticism, whether Christian, Islam, and Judaism. The unity of being. He is the real being, and everything else that he created are dependent being and sort of not real being. The reality of being is he that we discussed here, the he. So that's the reality of being. Now, it continues to say he doesn't, he begets not, and nor he was begotten, and there's nothing comparable, similar, equal to him. Now, when we have 3 minutes left, let me tell you very fast that all the way that this chapter discusses God is what, and also in Christianity and in the Latin they were called via negativa. So you are negating every aspect of qualities that you are giving to people, to human, to universe. He is not all of those things. So this is called via negativa, or which was called negative theology. It exists. Also, whether not only in the Quran, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, also Quran uses the term via negativa. This is the verse, this is the chapter, completely via negativa. On the other hand, you may ask the question that, so what about the other positive? Can we talk about God positively or not? Okay. This is another part of discussion that I guess with under 1 minute, or probably 1 minute, we cannot discuss about this. But the chapter, finally, let me say, let's conclude this chapter at least, and then we talk about positive theology as well, if term is correct. But yeah, this verse, this chapter is a complete via negativa. Unknown God was not born, is not a father or whatever to the other creation, is God. You discuss it, you discuss this essence in another sense that he's creator, but not that kind of personal relation. Very, discussed very much about that. And then negating whatever things, whatever, any other quality. When you are absolute, talking in an absolute way of negation, you are talking about that very essence, very, very essence of God, which was in this chapter was He. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. The He that this was discussed in the first verse, say He. That's the very secret, hidden He that you are not, that is not reachable, kind of unknown and secret. Okay. Then again, you discuss, Quran discusses, religions discuss about God in another way as well. And then we will discuss that later on. That's whatever, what we learned about this, it was a negative, via negativa in Latin, or negative theology. Now, I'm sorry, it's almost 4:31 and or 32. And I want to thank you for listening to me this afternoon. And please let me know if you have any question. Feel free, and turn off your Zoom if you want. And I'm here for questions. Thank you very much. Yeah.